Director of Veterinary Services here at Pet Poison Helpline. Thank you so much for joining us today for part 2 of our Veterinary Wellness webinar series. I'm delighted to have Dr. Elizabeth Strand back to speak with us, and that's who you see on the screen right now. I'll introduce her in just a second. So you may be wondering, if you didn't, especially if you didn't attend our first wellness session, why Pet Poison Helpline, a toxicology expertise consultation service, is hosting a webinar about wellness. Well, you know what, it's pretty simple. When I was approached and asked if I would have any interest in co-hosting a webinar on veterinary wellness topics, it was a no-brainer. We're veterinarians, I'm a veterinarian, we're owned and operated, staffed with veterinarians, veterinary professionals of all stripes, including our CVTs. And wellness, of course, is extremely important to us. It's important to our profession. We know, especially if you listen to our last webinar, that there's a lot of news and chatter about the increasing incidence of depression and anxiety and other mental health factors amongst veterinary professionals. And it's something that needs to be talked about. I think it's very important, and for the more we talk about it, the better able we are to tackle this. If you attended our last webinar, I'm sure, just like I was, you're blown away by Dr. Strand's lecture. It certainly brought up a lot of points for me, some of those aha moments that we all talk about. I thought, gosh, I didn't even realize I was doing that. So I learned a lot. I hope that you learned a lot. I'm talking about the webinar, of course, that we had before, and I just wanted to let you know that, oops, I apologize, my slides got a little bit ahead of me there. The last webinar was back in the middle of December, and if you did not get a chance to view it, it is recorded, it's archived on our website as well as the website for AVMA Life, which we will be sharing with you. So you have a chance to go back and watch it. If you didn't watch it and this is the first time you're joining us, that's fine. The webinars are meant to build upon each other, but they're also meant to be they're also a standalone webinar. So in just a second, I'll go ahead and introduce Dr. Elizabeth Strand, but I wanted to mention a couple of things real quick before we get going, just logistically. So today's webinar is being recorded, just like last time. We will have the recorded version up within about 24 hours. So please watch for that tomorrow. So if you're not able to attend the whole webinar, or you have colleagues you think would benefit from this, you want to share this with friends and family, you're more than welcome to do so. And you'll find that on petpoisonhelpline.com. Also, today's webinar is race approved. So bingo, even better, you get CE for being here today. And we will send out CE certificates to those who are logged in by the end of the week. So usually we do try and send those out within 48 hours of the webinar. So, and again, that's to everyone who is logged in. If you are listening in a group, so you're not the person to have logged in today, what I need you to do is send us an email to info@petpoisonhelpline.com. Give us your name and the email address that you'd like us to send the CE certificate to. And here's the catch. That needs to be sent to us within 24 hours. It's a very strict deadline, so we need to have that by 1 p.m. Central Time tomorrow. Then we'll send you a CE certificate as well. And all of this info is on the final slide of the presentation. So speaking of, if you'd like to download the presentation, you can download that out of the handout section on the GoToWebinar toolbar or the GoToWebinar dashboard. If you can't find it there, go to petpoisonhelpline.com. Under the Veterinarians tab, you'll see our webinars link, and the handouts are listed there as well. So if there are any other questions, you are welcome to ask questions, especially as we go along. There's no reason not to ask questions. Go ahead and ask questions in the written questions window that you have access to in the GoToMeeting dashboard. I may, depending on what the question is, interrupt Dr. Strand and ask the question then and there. If it's something I can answer, I may try and answer it then as well. But we'll try and endeavor to get everyone's question asked. If we don't get to yours and you have something that didn't get addressed, email us at the end of the webinar and we'll be sure to get back to you. So without further ado, let's get started. I'd like to quickly talk about Pet Poison Helpline in case you're not familiar with us. We are a 24/7 animal poison control center. We're based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're affiliated with the University of Minnesota here as well. So we're faculty in both the College of Veterinary Medicine and the College of Pharmacy. So we're staffed with a pretty wide berth of vets here. We've got 20 vets, over 35 vet techs, and specialists within critical care toxicology, of course. We have critical ascend staff, internists as well. And we also have PharmDs, because we're very unique in that we operate a human and animal poison center side by side. So I can go and bug my human colleagues as much as I want. It's very interesting. It's a fantastic team approach. So as you know, our case fee is $49. That includes unlimited consultations, callbacks, and as well as complimentary copies of the case report when our cases are finished. We're also really pride ourselves in being an educational center, and that's one of the reasons that we do a lot of webinars. We want to keep them free so they're accessible to everyone. There's some other educational materials that you can see on your screen there, and if those are of any interest to you, please send us an email. So at this point, I would like to turn this over to Dr. Katrina Geithner, who is a fantastic representative of AVMA Life, who has and that organization has very generously co-sponsored these webinars, these past two webinars with us. So, Dr. Geithner.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Brutlag. Yep. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Geithner. I'm the trust representative for AVMA Life. And as you can see, we're celebrating our 60th year of veterinarian-inspired insurance. This is insurance designed by veterinarians for veterinarians. And during our 60th year, we're launching a new website. It really looks fantastic. It's going to be easier to navigate and allows you more options for estimating your coverage and paying bills online. So this new website goes live on February 1st, so I just wanted to invite everybody to stop by and take a visit. On the next slide, we're going to show you that we continue to offer the best personal products for veterinarians. We offer life insurance, but we offer more than that too. We have disability, professional overhead, hospital indemnity, critical illness, and more. But in addition to our lines of personal insurance, AVMA Life has a strong commitment to wellness in the veterinary community, and that's why we're doing these webinars. In addition to the webinars, we've also partnered with AVMA, PLIT, AHA, Zoetis, and other industry leaders to design and offer hopefully tangible solutions to wellness concerns. We're very proud of our partnership with Pet Poison Helpline to sponsor this webinar with Dr. Strand. We've had a tremendous response to these webinars, and it's just furthering our commitment to really make a difference in the wellness community. We're planning on doing a series of wellness seminars, or excuse me, webinars, and the next one will be on financial wellness, and hopefully we'll be getting that to you in spring around March. I know we're going to take some great ideas away today from Dr. Strand. Personally, I'm really looking forward to the presentation. So once again, I just wanted to thank you for joining us today, and I'll let Dr. Brutlag go ahead and introduce Dr. Strand for us.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So it is my pleasure, my honor, to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Strand. She is the founding director of veterinary social work at the University of Tennessee College of Veterinary Medicine. Her interest areas include interpersonal neurobiology, animals and family systems, as well as communication, conflict resolution, and stress management skills in animal-related environments. She sounds like everyone needs a Dr. Strand in their clinic. So her professional mission, which I think is something we can all get behind, is to encourage the humane treatment of both people and animals, and to care for those professionals who care for animals. Her motto is be kind to yourself or else. Now, one small housekeeping tip here before we get going, or not tip, I guess request. Dr. Strand, can you actually give me mouse control, sorry guys that you all have to hear this, on the organizer name that says Anna B. Can you give me some mouse control there too, and that'll enable me to answer questions as well.
Okay,
Once you've done, I apologize, I thought I had that all figured out.
Yeah. I think you have mouse control, keyboard and mouse.
For both of my names, if you don't mind.
I think I did both names. Now we did both names.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry for the interruption, everyone.
No trouble. Did that work?
That works. That's
okay.
Awesome.
All righty. Well, thank you so much. I want to just express my sincere appreciation for the dedication to talking about this from the AVMA Life and from Pet Poison Control. So today's topic is neural integration and the reversal of poor well-being in veterinary medicine. And I'll give this information at the end of the talk as well. Our phone number at Veterinary Social Work is 865-755-8839, and we offer counseling resources and support for anyone. Everybody can have 4 free sessions. We're not a hotline, and so you often will call and leave a message. We'll get back to you and schedule some sessions. Okay. I covered my background in the previous webinar, so I won't do it here, but I will just share that I had the great opportunity, and it has been such a blessing in my life to be the founding director of the Veterinary Social Work Program, which is a partnership between the College of Social Work and the College of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Tennessee, and we attend to the human needs that arise at the intersection of veterinary and social work practice. Okay, so down to business. The terms that we covered last time, and I'll touch on them again today, are moral stress, knowing what the right thing to do is, but not being able to do it. Adverse childhood events, those things that happen to us before the age of 18 that are associated with poor physical and emotional health. Neural integration, having all 3 parts of the brain operating well together. Okay, those were the 3 main terms. Now we're going to add the terms, take-home terms, are brain states, which are different emotional brain states from joy, being at the top of the brain state 1, to distress, being at the lowest part of the brain, and the fact that we kind of have an emotional set point where we hang out. Earned secure attachment is the attachment that we have with our caregivers and others in our life that has been earned despite having adverse childhood events as we were kids. Conflict styles, the main way of dealing with conflict. Healthy mind platter, the daily behaviors for a healthy mind that are required. Flow, which is part of positive psychology. This is being absorbed and engaged in the moment. And my hypothesis is that veterinary professionals live in flow quite a bit in terms of your veterinary work. That's my hypothesis. And then lastly, moral resilience, which is, balancing moral stress, the ability to respond positively to the distress and the adversity caused by ethically complex situations. So the things we're adding are brain states from 1 to 5, earned secure attachment, basically resiliency. How do we be resilient even if we had ACEs? Conflict styles. There's more than one way to deal with the conflict. Healthy mind platter, the things you have to do every single day to have a healthy mind. Flow, being absorbed in the moment of the work that you're doing, and then moral resilience. These are your take-homes for today's webinar. Okay, down to business. We talked about well-being is when your resources equal the demands that are placed on you, and they are focused on psychological, social, and physical areas, and we're going to focus on that in terms of building your resources today. Your resources to deal with giving bad news and managing adverse events and interacting with difficult clients and working effectively in teams and balancing work and home life and dealing with financial issues, dealing with ethical dilemmas, which is what is part of practicing veterinary medicine. So these are the stressors that you work with. But here's the thing, as we talked about last time, stress is not bad. In fact, you need to have stress in order to have optimal performance. If you have too little stress, if you're down here with not very much stress at all, you're bored. And if you're too much stress over here, it kind of looks like boredom, but really it's ill health, exhaustion, and fatigue. So cultivating and figuring out how to create that right sweet spot of stress so that you can have excellent well-being and be satisfied in your life is an important skill. The thing, though, is that you have another layer to the stress. You have moral stress because you're veterinarians and health professionals. Moral stress is when you're aware of what the ethical principles are at stake, but external factors prevent you from making a decision that would reduce the conflict. Classic example is pet owner that's not ready to euthanize their pet, but you and the entire team feel like it's time for the pet to be euthanized. Or vice versa, client comes in, wants the pet euthanized, you and the team don't see that it's needed for the animal to be euthanized. All of these are morally stressful situations, And they require moral sensitivity, which is more than cognitive capacity. It's more than just thinking. It involves awareness that there's an ethical dilemma, thinking things through. What are the values? What are the morals? What are the professional guidelines I have to consider in the decision? The feelings that are associated with morally complex situations, and then the fact that you have to take some action. That's why having neural integration is essential, because these morally complex situations are more than just your thinking brain. It involves all of your brain. Reminder that integration means differentiation plus connection. Differentiation, recognizing and respecting the differences between people, things, values, ideas. It's a big picture kind of concept. And then connection, recognizing the ways that these differences are connected in a necessary way. So the triune model of the brain is we have the executive center, the thinking part of the brain, the emotional part of the brain stem. The hand model of the brain that we looked at last week is that this thumb is your limbic brain, and then the survival center is your brain stem down here. All three parts of the neural integration is having all three parts of the brain differentiated, so you respect that you have a thinking brain, emotional brain, a brain stem, but they're all connected and working together. A metaphor is if you have both of your legs stuck together, you can hop. You might even be able to hop side to side, but you can't walk, because walking requires differentiation. The right leg is doing something different than the left leg. And you certainly, unless you have differentiation, can't dance, and you certainly can't climb to the top of a mountain. So more is available to you when you have neural integration, when you see that you have three parts of the brain and that they are different and that they do need to be connected. So we talked about the concept of the hand model of the brain, brain stem, limbic brain, cortical brain, and that sometimes when there is big stress, there's big feelings, or there's big stress response in the brain stem, it causes the inhibitory effect of the prefrontal cortex or the cortex to flip your lid. When your cortex is functioning well and your prefrontal cortex in particular is functioning well, then the fingers are able to come across the limbic brain, the thumb, and the brain stem, and you're able to make good decisions and manage feelings. Here it's written for a kid as hugging big feelings, but this concept of hugging big feelings is actually kind of bears out in the mindfulness literature that we're going to look at in a moment. So why would you need to be able to hug big feelings and make good decisions? Because the veterinary environment, people are gaga about animals. They have definitely strong feelings about animals, and you're dealing with strong feelings every day. And then because you're in a medical environment and you're dealing with morally complex situations, you're also dealing with conflict. Not all conflict is morally complex or from a moral stress issue, but much of it is. So we need to revisit this concept of ACEs, because ACEs, things that happen to us in terms of abuse, family dysfunction, or neglect before the age of 18, impacts our capacity for neural integration. If you remember, and the research is very good on this, they started studying it in 1998, and it has been replicated in population-based studies since that time, that 63% of us have at least one ACE. And adding one additional component to this is when we have ACEs, that it affects our type of attachment we have to ourselves and to other people. This is based on the work of the ethologist Konrad Lorenz, who found the idea of imprinting or attachment with his geese, and then that was transferred into looking at human beings' attachment to caregivers. And as you can imagine, if we have ACEs in our family and in our caregiving system growing up, it impacts our attachment. We have two types of main attachment. We have secure and insecure. This research looked at 10,000 adult attachment interviews, which is one way of measuring attachment, since 1985, and the results indicated that those that are not experiencing a clinical issue, meaning they're not in distress or not seeking help for distress, were about 50 to 50% insecure versus secure. Those of us that were experiencing some type of distress, insecure attachment was much more represented. if we remember back to the last webinar, we talked about rats and mama rats that are very good to their baby rats, and they lick them and they cuddle them, and those rats are securely attached and they're happy rats. But those rats that had a mom that maybe ignored them or not as attentive a mom were more anxious rats. And so it impacts, attachment style impacts the perception of threat. A nervous rat, a little baby rat that had a mom that wasn't so attentive, grows up and they might be more anxious. The good side of that is that they're able to see that a snake is coming down to get them, and they would be able to survive in the wild because they'd be like, that's a snake, I got to get away from you. The happy rat might be like, hey, what are you? And then whomp, you know, they're eaten. So it's got a positive and a negative side in terms of secure and insecure, but the concept of perception of threat being impacted by ACEs and our attachment style is important. Okay, that's a lot of information, and there's a lot more on attachment. If you're interested, you can look at Dan Siegel's work. The keynote for the AVMA brought to the San Antonio meeting this past summer was so excellent, and he has a wonderful playlist on YouTube looking at attachment styles. It can help you know yourself better and help you know people that come to your clinic needing your services, and also your family and friends better as well. Okay, so why is this important? Because perceived stress, how we perceive stress, has everything to do with the length of telomeres. So we can have people with the same type of stressor, same exact thing. In this EPIL study, it's caregiving moms of kids with special needs. Those moms that had increased perceived stress, they were more likely to perceive their stress as a threat, had telomeres that were 10 years older. So a 30-year-old had 40-year-old telomeres. Telomeres are associated with aging and disease, and they are at the end of your DNA strand. So you want to have long telomeres to be healthy. And it all was related to simply, do I perceive this stress as a challenge, which is associated with long telomeres, or do I perceive this stress as a threat? Mindfulness, and again we're going to cover some of this, is associated with more healthy practices or habits of perception of stress. Also, you can watch this YouTube TED Talk about making stress your friend. It's an excellent primer in the research in this area. The big take home I had from this video was that oxytocin is a stress hormone. So my body wants to absolutely bond with others in times of stress, which may be just the opposite of what maybe my mind wants to do, which is I'm stressing out, I don't want anybody, I can't trust anybody, I got to do it by myself. So being able to do what's biologically natural in times of stress seems to be associated with better wellness. Okay, brain states. So we've done moral stress, ACEs, neural integration, and now brain states. So when we're neurally integrated, we're kind of up here at a high brain state. We're kind of hanging around in the neocortex. When we're very stressed out, we kind of hang down here in the reptilian brain. Now, based on our attachment style, our experience with ACEs, we can kind of have an emotional set point. So a person might be wired kind of at a 4. They kind of hang out down here. They have moments of joy, but generally they kind of live in a stressed out state. And then there are other people, you know them, I know them, it's not me for sure, but you know them, who hang out up here. They're happy people. And they go down to brain state 5 occasionally, but they pretty much hang out up here. Brain states also, just like moral stress, is more than just thinking, and just like neural integration is also more than just thinking part of the brain. It's the limbic part of the brain and the brain stem. Brain states have different areas. So a brain state 1 has a cognitive, an emotional, relational, and behavioral component to it. So a brain state 1, cognitively, you're able to think abstractly and problem solve, think outside of the box. When you're in a brain state 5, you're kind of irrational. Behaviorally, brain state 1, you're like on top of it behaviorally. You know your keys are, you're eating right, you're exercising. Brain state 5, you know, boxes of cookies you're eating, you know, Amazon.com, destructive behavior. And here's the thing, we all go up and down in all brain states all day long. It's not about not ever entering a brain state, it's just where do you hang out the most. When we're at a high brain state 1, and I know this is a lot of information, when we're at a brain state 1, or we're neurally integrated, those are the same thing, we have flexibility. We're able to have harmony in our environment with others, and there's order. So we can have the same stressor, a client that is a difficult client that walks in the clinic. If we are neurally integrated, we're high in integration, we're flexible with that person, we're able to establish harmony, and there's a sense of order in handling that person. Whereas if we're in a moment of a low brain state 4 or 5, then we're more likely to have a chaotic environment. We're maybe rigid, no, you have to do it this way, you didn't come on time, it's not going to work, or some other form of rigidity, and there's a sense of disorder. So we function better with the stressors that arise when we're neurally integrated, regardless of what the stressor is. There are bukus of types of brain integration. Look at all 9 of these. You don't have to know them. One example would be, your right side of the brain is about creativity, the left side of the brain is logic, linear, and you want to be able to have both sides of those brains talking to each other. Well, here's the thing, is that the prefrontal cortex, the highest part of the brain, is kind of like the grand central station to integration of all parts of the brain. So when the prefrontal cortex is operating well, you're able to regulate your stress in your body, you have attuned communication with others, there's emotional balance, you're able to respond flexibly to stressors, you don't react to stressors, you're able to say, oh, what's happening, and you're able to respond appropriately or effectively, that in a way that reduces your stress. You have empathy, insight, you're able to manage your fear, intuition, and morality. Again, mindfulness is associated with the presence of all of these functions. And secure attachment is associated with having a very healthy prefrontal cortex. And ACEs is associated with challenges, or insecure attachment is associated with challenges in the prefrontal cortex. So this grand central station is really important for reversing poor well-being. But here's the coolest, most wonderful thing, is that you can change how your brain is functioning no matter what upbringing there was. I can, anybody can, through neuroplasticity. They used to think that once you were 12, that was it, your brain was set in stone, you couldn't change anything. Now we know you can change the way your brain functions and your prefrontal cortex functions up until the day you die. And this can be associated with earned secure attachment. So even if I, for instance, had ACEs growing up, I can, through some particular behaviors, cultivate for myself earned secure attachment, which would be associated with a prefrontal cortex that is able to deal with the stress in my life. The things that are associated with it are, if growing up I had this, very important, a trusted alternative source of support in childhood, somebody that believed in you, that loved you, that cared about you, even if you had problems that were associated with ACEs. This is a cool one. Being the spouse of a securely attached person for 5 years creates secure attachment in you. I think that's really cool. There's also evidence that the number of hours in psychotherapy, so spending some time telling your story, making sense of your story, is definitely associated with earned secure attachment. And then, again, practicing mindfulness. The more securely attached we are, the more neurally integrated we are, the more we can hang out in this brain state 1, in the higher order emotions of gratitude, compassion, forgiveness, awe, joy, and love. And we can have people say, my, what big telomeres you have. It's all about
Dr. Strand,
yes.
Just a question came up that I thought was really good. So to change our brain functions, now we know we can change it. Over what kind of time frame can you really make those changes? How rapid can that be?
8 weeks. 8 weeks. So let me get to a few more slides. It's coming, I promise. That's a great question. 8 weeks it takes. Is there another question?
No, that was it so far.
Okay, cool beans. Thanks for that. Yep, about 8 weeks. All right. So we have resiliency factors. Happiness is 50% predicted by your genes, what you got from your mom and your dad. 10% is associated with your life circumstances, and 40% is associated with your state of mind. So you have control over the things that you do for 40% to change your capacity for resiliency or bounce back from a stressor. So the internal state of mind, poor us, because we're kind of like cluttered mind. We got a lot going on compared to our, perhaps maybe our canine friends who maybe have a quiet mind. We're struggling with all the stressors of our life. And if we look at, this is again Eppel, who did that seminal research in 2004 about telomeres. This is a 2016 paper looking at cognitive stress, mindfulness, and telomeres. And what they found was that mindfulness is associated with better cognitive, more pleasant states, so the higher order emotions, and also a better vagal tone or a capacity to manage fear and the stress response. It's negatively associated to rumination, which we're going to talk about in a moment, and also stress arousal system, oxidative stress. So these things are associated with long telomeres. These things are associated with shortening of the telomeres. Okay, well, rumination, right? It's good for some species. Very good, essential in fact, but for us it's not so good. And the definition of rumination is repetitive thought that is not goal-directed. So it's just endless. It won't stop, and it's not necessarily getting you anywhere. You've already made a decision about what you want to do, but you can't stop thinking about whatever the stressor is. More difficultly is depressive rumination, where that rumination has a negative self-focus on an assumed basic fault, and it is prolonged negative mood, and over time it is highly predictive of depression. So getting control over this ruminative problem that robs us of sleep and positive states is really, really essential. This is why mindfulness has gained so much attention since the 1980s. We even have apps like Headspace, and the seminal program that is associated with all of this research, which now is up into the 6,000s, is a program called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, founded by Jon Kabat-Zinn. You can find a mindfulness-based stress reduction class in your area just by Googling it, and this 8-week protocol is what is demonstrating that the effects can change. You can change how your prefrontal cortex operates within 8 weeks. Mindfulness is associated with decrease in anxiety, depression, management of substance abuse, helping with eating disorders, chronic pain, improving well-being and quality of life. This is that research looking at how long does it take. It's a systematic review looking at multiple results of mindfulness-based stress reduction classes and fMRI. And what they find is that there is increased integrity and capacity of prefrontal cortex functioning after 8 weeks, comparable to that of long-term meditators. Moreover, the hippocampus, which is in yellow, which is responsible for learning and memory, is also improved through and comparable to long-term meditators through the MBSR class. And then there is decrease in the reactivity of the amygdala, which is the fear system of the brain. Okay, so why would all of this prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and amygdala changes be important in veterinary practice? Because remember, you're dealing every day with a lot of feelings and conflict. So having your cortex online is essential to reversing the effects of the negative impact of negative feelings and conflict in the veterinary environment.
So
Okay.
Speaking of reversing that conflict, we actually had a question too about when you're talking about the brain changing, is there physical changes that the telomeres are also lengthening? So, or once you have kind of shorter telomeres, can they actually be lengthened again, or how irreversible is that?
So the research says that they can be lengthened very quickly, particularly for anxiety. It's a little bit different for depression, but you can both lengthen telomeres and also have changes in the brain. So there's both things happening. Is that good?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, there was an interesting question here. Someone said, so if I'm already aging 10 times faster, will I always be aging 10 times faster? You can hear the fear stirring here.
Yeah, thank you so much. You will not always be aging 10 times faster. You can slow it down by these behaviors of cultivation of neural integration. And those involve things associated with the healthy mind platter that we're going to cover. So there's absolutely hope. There's neuroplasticity. You can turn it around, but it takes work. It's not, you can't just keep doing what you're doing and expect your telomeres to get longer. That is not going to happen. You really have to change and start to cultivate some behaviors that are associated with neural integration. So I want to touch on the fact that conflict exists, and it happens in terms of there's a disagreement, then people start personalizing the disagreement. Why did she say that about me? Then people will say things like, she always says that about me, so now it's escalating, right? Then there's forming alliances. You know what I'm talking about in the clinic, forming alliances. Jenny, do you know what Martha said about me? Then there's the grapevine starts going about what Jenny said. Then there might be a moment of open hostility. I know this is terrible to talk about, but we have to talk about it because it's part of what is necessary for reversing poor well-being, is knowing how to handle conflict. There could be a moment of open hostility, and then, you know, the stress response, the lowest part of the brain, fight or flight. Big feelings in conflict arise, and so the capacity for the cortical brain to stay online when there's big feelings or there's a fight or flight response is essential. Making good choices about how to deal with conflict means recognizing that there are conflict styles, and you're not going to know all of this at the end of this webinar. We're just going to plant the seed of what the work is ahead to reverse poor wellness. There's conflict styles. Everybody needs to be able to use more than one conflict style, but most of us kind of hang around with one. So you might have your main conflict style be avoiding, which may cause more stress for you in the end. Learning to use all conflict styles and make decisions about which is the right conflict style to use is important in thinking things through, like how important is the issue? How important is the issue to me and to somebody else? Is it important to maintain a positive relationship? Sometimes we have to let go of relationships that are endlessly conflictual. How much time pressure is there? Is this an emergency situation? Do I have time to be nice? Maybe not. You know, let's go. We've got to get this done. To what extent does one party trust one another? Am I trying to build trust with somebody? And what is the power differential? Our basic principles of conflict management. And last webinar, it's important to revisit. This affects the bottom line in terms of managing conflict well. A lot of times rudeness occurs in conflict. Well, rudeness in this research looking at NICU teams was inversely related with information sharing and help seeking. So if you're rude to me, I'm not going to ask you to I'm not going to share information with you, and I'm not going to feel comfortable asking you for help. These two behaviors are positively associated with diagnostic performance and procedural performance, the ability to do my job. So conflict management, which requires neural integration, affects patient care. Okay, so the question came in, am I endlessly going to be 10 years older with shortened telomeres? And the answer is absolutely not, but you do have to do some things to keep your lid on more of the time. The healthy mind platter, every day you have to play. You also have to have connecting time, focus time, physical time, time for sleep, 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, and then time in, which is associated with mindfulness practice and others. We add at Tennessee good food because we know that there is a relationship between the gut and the brain. And then let me just talk, because the rest of the slides are going to cover these, let me just touch on downtime for a second. Downtime is doing nothing, like nothing. And I don't know many of you that do nothing, honestly. Hardworking, driven, incredibly smart people who, you know, are dedicated don't really do nothing. And I mean nothing. I mean like maybe watch birds, maybe. But definitely not binge on Netflix, which is not a form of downtime. That's just zoning out, which is not helpful for your stress management. It is considered, its downtime is non-goal directed time. So it's, I call it pitter-pattering around the house. I'm just kind of being pitter-patter, okay? Let's look at the other parts of the Healthy Mind Platter. Time in can be done with journaling. This is a research study looking at emotional expressive writing to alleviate euthanasia-related stress in animal shelter workers. And the results indicated that actually there was improvement in cortisol levels in this study, but also the qualitative comment was when I look back at its clarity, the clarity of my emotions and getting it off my chest is what helped. Putting stuff down on paper gets it off of my mind. In other words, reduces rumination. Getting it out reduces the rumination so that you can have a more clear mind when you're trying to go to bed, for instance. Social support, really important for telomeres and brain functioning and dealing with stress. In fact, veterinary nurses indicated that it was the workplace social supports that were the most important factor in influencing job stress in their work. In human medicine, they have something called the huddle, which is a short, like 10 to 15 minute stand-up kind of meeting to address any kind of challenges that are coming down the pike in the veterinary day, for instance. And it's kind of like, I like to think of it as kind of like a puppy pack. You know, we got Mrs. Jones coming in. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle that? And if we go back to the concept of oxytocin as a natural stress hormone and like puppies cuddling up together, it's like, I like to think of it as an oxytocin puppy pack. Supporting each other that way. This huddling is the cultivation of a moral climate within a veterinary clinic. There's a really great research study looking at emergency rooms in children's hospitals and moral climate. And those emergency rooms that had a huddling type of environment where people talked through ethical challenges and decision making and supported each other in puppy packs, had better wellness among the medical professionals, and also the patients were more satisfied and felt better about the experience of being in the hospital compared to those clinics or emergency rooms where it was kind of like put your head down, get it done, don't talk about feelings, you know, move forward. Less wellness among the workers and also not as good of an experience for the patients. So in human medicine, there's things like Schwarzenegger rounds and the Balance Society, which are debriefing meetings that claim this concept of if you can name it, you can tame it. So if you can talk about the morally complex situation in a supportive environment, it is protective in terms of well-being. Okay, so we're going to do our little text message in. There's play that's really important every day as well. So we'd love to see what you do for play, and you can participate by getting your phone out and texting VETSW to the number 222-22333. Once you've done that, then you can enter in what you do for play. As we're waiting for responses to come in, I'll say that one of the things, skiing, yay! I have this thing, I love startling people, scaring people. It's really not very nice, but I just get the biggest kick about it, and it's a big playful thing. People know here that I will be hiding around corners and popping out before just for fun. Exercise with friends, I barbecue, hiking, beautiful. Keep them coming. We've got room for 200 of you to respond. Take my dog to the dog park, bowling. Oh my gosh, bowling. That must be so satisfying, you know, like hitting a strike. Horseback riding, singing, hiking, surf. Nice. Hiking, video games with my husband, walking my dog. Legos, exercising. Legos! Oh my gosh, that's so cool. We just had a Lego night here at the College of Vet Med by our anatomy professor. It was really a big hit. Reading, tennis, walking dogs. Yeah, dogs are so fun. That's playtime for me too. Agility with dogs. Eating, yeah. Good food. Perfect. Dancing. Ride my gator in the woods. Oh, I guess that's like three-wheeler maybe? Coloring, I read. Beautiful. Coloring, adult coloring, yeah, that's very much of a flow activity actually. Reading, music, movies, dancing, excellent. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. We're going to go into the boat, watching movies. We could keep watching all the play activities, but I want to get through these other things that will be important for you in reversing wellness, dancing with my daughter, telling jokes. Love telling jokes. Okay, I don't want to stop. Paddleboarding, reading, but I got to keep going. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. That was great. All right. Exercise definitely is a growing literature that it is very effective for the treatment of depression. This meta-analysis found that it's an effective treatment for unipolar depression. It's comparable to psychotherapy and antidepressants, and it's also a viable adjunct for augmentation to antidepressants and for depression. So if you're very, very depressed, it can be hard to exercise. So don't necessarily say that one is better than the other, but if you're feeling blue, starting with an exercise regimen, and it doesn't have to be an intense one, is definitely supported in the literature as has a very effective antidepressant effect. Of course, good food we talked about. I'm totally inspired by this gut biome kind of relationship where you have fermented milk products with probiotic, and those women, healthy women that did that, took that daily for 4 weeks, had regions of their brain associated with processing emotion and sensation changes, and for the better. Sleep. New neurons are built in the adult brain during sleep, and the consequences of not sleeping endanger hippocampal integrity, the ability to integrate experiences, learn, and handle memories is affected negatively by not enough sleep, and also can be impacting cognitive dysfunction, including looking like the development of mood disorders. Okay, I know I give a lot of information, but I'm confident you can track it because you guys are veterinarians and super smart. I was giving a talk, and the night before the talk, I really had this feeling that maybe veterinarians are really dedicated and actually experiencing flow. Flow is a concept developed by this psychologist. I'm going to call him Dr. C because I have a hard time stating his name. But flow is this relationship, this perfect balance between challenge and skill. So the level of challenge matches perfectly the level of skill, and then you get into this flow experience. And flow is associated with being focused and concentrated. There's great inner clarity. You feel like you have the skills needed to address the challenge that's in front of you, so much so that you're not even thinking about yourself. You're just consumed with what you're doing. There's a sense of timelessness to it, and many of the play activities are associated with flow, but I think you guys get into flow in your practice of veterinary medicine. So when I was giving this and presenting this idea, one astute member of the audience said, well, it sounds like if there are these great flow experiences, it could be addictive. Well, yeah, but nobody's done much research about that, except for in gaming, video gaming. This is looking at happiness and flow as predictors of addiction in video gaming. Really, I've seen 2 papers on it. The finding here is that if you have decreased general happiness, so you already are feeling kind of blue, coupled with the sense of loss of time, which is one of the parts of flow, is that where did the day go? Oh my gosh, it's already 4 o'clock? How'd that happen? Are associated with addiction. So and that's not good. So one remedy could be scheduled check-ins, and I've used this with many veterinarians, and it actually is quite effective, where you schedule 3 or 4 times a day, your watch goes off, and you pause for a moment and you say, okay, am I neurally integrated? How's my brain doing? Am I thinking clearly? Or am I really stressed out? Am I ruminating? Take a deep breath, engage the vagal brake, or the relaxation response, and then ask yourself, am I hungry? Have I eaten anything? Because in flow, right, you're not thinking about yourself. So you got to stop every now and then and say, okay, let's see, what did I eat today? Then do I need to go to the bathroom? In flow, you're not going to be thinking about that because you're just so consumed. And then you can start to use some of this, this whole issue of happiness is an issue, and we're going to turn our attention to some of the positive psychology techniques to build happiness, and some of them are, what am I grateful for? Or, can I play a little bit right now? Is there some kind of fun thing I could do? And what would be a random act of kindness that I could do that would help my brain become neurally integrated? So let's look at some of this positive, and we're coming to the close of all of the information and all of the terms that I'm asking you to consider in reversing poor wellness in veterinary medicine. And again, this is not like an easy talk where I'm just, telling you, you really should sleep. I'm trying to present an argument of why these behaviors take work and are required for having good wellness. Okay, so one more, which is positive activity interventions, or PAIs. PAIs are, and this is Sonia Lubomirsky, who is one of the real founders of the positive psychology movement. In the past, it was kind of like, we know people are depressed and anxious. How can we reduce their negative symptoms? But we never spent much time looking at how can we make people actually feel good. And so the positive activity intervention is about building the positive emotions, the higher order neurally integrated emotions that are available to you when your brain is functioning well. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of them. I've listed all of them, but I don't have time to cover all of them. So one is prolonged positive experiences. If like a client comes in and says, Dr. Smith, I just really am so grateful to you for everything that you've done for my dog, and you couldn't have been more nice in handling all of this with me, and I just am so appreciative of you. Taking a moment, not just keep going through your day, taking a moment and like feeling, what does that feel like to have somebody like love you and feel grateful for what you do for them. As veterinarians, I know you do that every day, so pausing and saying, wow, that was nice, she really likes me, or I really did a good job. Directing your attention to 5 things that you're grateful for each day. Increasing your pro-social behavior, or 5 sneaky random acts of kindness that you can do each day. Maybe you don't tell people that you do it, you leave a piece of chocolate somewhere, but inside you have this little sneaky things that says, I did something nice for somebody, and it causes positive emotions in you. Increase awareness of your personal strengths, so know what you're good at and find a way to use what you're good at each day. You might be really good at organizing the schedule, so make sure that that's something that you have to do each day because you're really good at it and people like that you do it and it feels good. Strengthen your commitment to your personal values. This one changed my life, I have to tell you, because it helped me do hard things. Because when I had to do a hard thing, I was able to say to myself, why I'm doing this is because I have this value. So figure out what your personal values are. You can do that by asking yourself, who and what is most important to me? Writing it down, spending some time writing it down, and then making your decisions based on that value or those values every day. It gives you like this anchor that helps you with the decisions that you have to make that may be hard. Okay, a couple more. Imagine the best possible future for 5 minutes each day. So maybe there's a dream you have, or there's a vacation you're going to take. Spending 5 minutes each day, bringing that to your mind. Investing time in making someone else happy. The whole concept of altruism is associated with increased feelings of well-being in yourself when you are altruistic with others. And then recalling another person's kindness and writing a gratitude letter. Spending time expressing gratitude to others can be very helpful. So and then after that, create your own formula of positive activities, the ones that you like, the ones that work for you, and use them every day. The results of this research indicate that by doing these tasks, you can improve your positive affect and psychological well-being, and that the people in the study were those that had depression, major depressive disorder diagnoses, and their level of feelings of well-being were up to the general population. Traditionally, it was if you have depression, we just reduce your depressed feelings, but we don't necessarily make you feel happier. These interventions actually reduce the depressed feelings, that was another finding, and also make you actually feel the higher order emotions feel actually better. And the results of these interventions were maintained over a 6-month period. Cultivating moral resilience is the ability to respond positively to the distress and adversity caused by an ethically complex situation. So there's moral stress and there's moral resilience. And I would say that the things we've reviewed in this lecture and the things that are going to be in the handout and the resources that are available through hyperlinks are things to do as a professional responsibility. I do them as a social worker to be able to perform my duties as a social worker. And I would argue that that's true for all professionals, including veterinary professionals. Moral resilience is associated with being mindful, regulating and disrupting rumination, negative patterns of thinking that arise in morally stressful situations, having self-awareness and insight and moral sensitivity, which is recognizing that you have more than one part of your brain. You have an emotional brain, you've got a brain stem, and all of those have to be considered in dealing with the stressors of working with the public. And then having decisions that you make in these morally complex situations based on principled actions from your value system and from the standard of the professional ethical guidelines. And then these last three are associated with building a moral climate, having an environment that supports ethical decision making in a supportive way. So some resources as you're on your well-being journey are to find out what your ACE score is. This is a hyperlink here, and it is the ACE calculator, and it's free. Also find out your attachment style. This is a free assessment that can tell you a little bit about that. The Thomas Kilman conflict style, this is also hyperlinked. This one has a fee associated with it, but you might be able to find other ways to increase your flexibility in how you navigate conflict. Having that knowledge will reduce your stress in dealing with conflict. And then this is a very nice free scale on just monitoring the well-being, your own well-being, and also the well-being of your people in your practice on a kind of ongoing way, having people fill those out. All of these are resources. This is a free mindfulness-based stress reduction class. It's online, so if you couldn't go to a class because you're too busy, you can still do it for free in an online way. This is an app and a website called Happify. This is associated with both mindfulness and also the positive affective interventions. Insight Timer has many, it's an app and a website and has many time in type of practices that you might find interesting and helpful. Also an app called Headspace. If there is a history of depression, cognitive therapy, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy can reduce relapse up to 50%. And then emotional brain training is able to help you lift your emotional set point if that struck you as something that might be useful. Other resources, of course, staying connected to the AVMA and your state VMA's well-being websites and groups. Net et al. 2015 study that I reviewed in the last webinar found that those that were connected and members of the AVMA and their state VMAs had better well-being. There's also education you can do to help you navigate situations that might be morally stressful. Question, Persuade, Refer is a suicide prevention program, so you'll know what to do if you're faced with situations where this comes up. And I've been surprised in veterinary practice how often clients express suicidal ideation. I had no idea when I first started 16 years ago that I would be dealing with that so much. So knowing what to do reduces your stress because you've got the resources to deal with the challenge. Emotional CPR is another kind of program to help people through emotional crises. There's also something called crisis text, where you can text message if you're having a crisis or a client's having a crisis. You don't have to talk to somebody. Sometimes that's better, not having to talk. Then, of course, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So I gave a lot of information. I hope that some of it rang true and found as a helpful path for you in moving forward in the responsibility for wellness. Balance is key to life. It's high stakes, man, like this kitty. You know, it's not bubble baths and fly fishing. It's a high stakes kind of thing, and you are totally worth it. So I hope you do it. This is us again. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Strand. This is, as with the first, this is just fabulous. Very, very good information. There were a couple of questions I wanted to run by you because I think they're very spot-on questions. A couple
Great.
of people ask, how important is it to have different types of play? Or is kind of just doing one act of play that really satisfies you, is that good enough?
You know what? That is a great question. I do not know the answer to that in terms of the research. I think one type of play is fine. If it is really, unless it's going over into addiction, because we talked about that whole flow play thing, I think one type of play is really great, as long as you're kind of experiencing a healthy flow each day. Great, great, great question.
And we had a couple of people, and I can put myself in this bucket, of course, too, who say, oh, when I'm stressed out, I can't sleep. And I think that's a pretty common reaction.
Yeah.
Are there recommendations, resources, anything that specifically maybe in that time when you, especially when you can't sleep, ways to that you recommend to shut off your brain and help you recenter?
So what I would say, the resources to reach out for, to stop, that's rumination. Rumination. Lie down and go to sleep, can't sleep because the mind won't stop. Rumination. Repetitive, non-goal directed thinking. So the thing to reach for is to access Insight Timer and find yourself one of the relaxation sleep recordings free. Put it in your iPhone or some other kind of like MP3 player and plug in so that you're not just lying there and allowing the mind to take over. That's what to do.
Excellent. Yeah, that's helpful. And I know, I mean, of course, right, all of these things can sometimes be easier said than done, but I think you start, right? You start somewhere and you move forward, and I really appreciate your acknowledgement that this is not something that's necessarily easy, but it's imperative.
Right. I wish I didn't have to do it.
No, you did a great job.
Sometimes I just want to keep
I want to tell everyone that I realized that, so the PDF that you downloaded, the hyperlinks in there are non-functional, and I'm sorry about that. We realized that kind of at the last moment. So we will be putting up a new PDF that does, the hyperlinks will work in that, and you'll get, everyone who's listening right now, everyone who registered will get an email letting you know when that PDF is up. So that really should be up within 24 hours. So you can, at that point, you'll be able to access those hyperlinks. And, you know, a couple of questions came up, too, about, we're talking a lot about how to get, how to make ourselves better. And are there good ways to help our friends and family members understand why this is important and get them on board with this as well? And maybe if, you know, we're a little bit more narrowly integrated and we see someone who's struggling, how do you bring them into the fold?
Right. Well, the first thing is that, remember that finding where if you're married to somebody for 5 years who's securely attached, you become securely attached. And that's based on the concept of mirror neurons. And you know what it's like. You know what it feels like to be around a person who has good well-being. It makes you feel good. And so the best thing you can do to get your family and friends on board is take care of yourself and then invite them to participate in the things that you're doing. So if you, by golly, say, I'm going to walk, there's some evidence that 35 minutes has a big effect in the brain. So I'm going to walk for 35 minutes, and then you say in the clinic, come on, we're going to go lunch break, walk for 35 minutes, or to your spouse or your child, come on, let's do this together. But the first step is that if I'm neurally integrated, it impacts the brain and raises the level of the other person across from me.
That's really helpful. That's good to hear. Well, there are, to be respectful of everyone's time, there's some more questions I see coming through, and that's fine. We'll be around to answer some questions. What I'm going to do right now is go through just the final webinar slides that I want to touch base on. And just so everyone knows, we do have more webinars coming up. This is the 2017 Pet Poison Helpline webinar series. So these are our 2017 toxicology webinars that are free, and the schedule has been put out. We will also be posting additional webinars with AVMA, like we talked, Dr. Geithner mentioned too. We'll try to do some on financial wellness and teach us all to be a little bit more financially savvy. We could all probably use that. And then again, I just wanted to thank AVM Life for their generous sponsorship of these webinars. Here's Dr. Katrina Geithner's contact information, which please feel free to note down. It will be in your handout, and you can certainly contact her with any questions about AVMA Life, the webinars, and if it's something that she can also redirect you to Pet Poison Helpline or Dr. Strand as needed. So finally, I'm just going to close with our little frequently asked questions that we get at the end about when do you get your CE certificate, what happened if you attended the CE or the webinar in a group instead of individually, and how to get access to this webinar online, the recorded webinar. So at this point, I think what we'll do is, let's see, I'm just going to take a peek at the questions here, and what we might do is, it looks like we don't have very many lingering. I think this is a lot of just kudos for Dr. Strand, so thanks everyone for sending these in. I'm going to have we'll stop the voice component of the webinar. I'll have Dr. Strand take a peek at the questions, and there might be a few others out there that she has some info for, so we'll probably stay on for another 5-10 minutes just looking at the written questions that came in, and we'll go from there. Thank you again, everyone, so much for attending. I really hope that you took a lot away. We appreciate you being here.